Agent Morris with the NSA.
There is something real here.
Did you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the first-hand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General. Biologics came to some of these recoveries.
Those could represent exquisite new adversary technology.
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
The government is covering up some level of its knowledge and understanding about what some of those things are.
The Soul Foundation, which just announced a new initiative for UFO research and policy.
It's nuts, man. I mean, we're just small-town buds who saw a UFO in the woods. I mean, now we're hanging out with the government.
Wow. What floor were you guys on?
Hello, welcome to another edition of Anomaly-NOW. I'm your host, Smiles Lewis, transmitting to you from Austin, Texas. This is the usually weekly, sometimes live, really not in a long time, news and media roundup for the 501c3 nonprofit Scientific Anomaly Institute. Thank you for joining us. Well, lots going on. We're going to really focus today on the current Disclosure Day climate. We're going to be doing a review of Steven Spielberg's new movie, Disclosure Day, which came out last Friday on my birthday and which I saw over the weekend with some friends. Had a great time despite the film. And I'm going to do a deep dive. There will be spoilers. I will do alerts when I'm about to start all that. But yeah, in the news, so much to go over. Really not sure where to start. There is this new UAP advisory council that's been created by the current administration, and which kind of worries me. We have, several headlines. Of course, one of the biggest names in this new group is Avi Loeb, who, of course, is now synonymous, infamous, connected to 3I Atlas, the mysterious extraterrestrial object that came hurtling through our solar system, and which he, at every opportunity, asked the scientific question of, could this be something more than just a natural object? But he is leading a new scientific advisory council on UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, formerly UFOs, much prefer that. Hey, let's even go back to UFOs or flying saucers. I don't care, but I like the older terms. But interestingly, skeptic Michael Shermer has also been named to participate. Of course, he has warmed to UFO research over the last few years, as I've reported, and others have. I would just say, as nice a fellow as Avi Loeb seems, he is a very interesting character with his background connections to SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars, and his thirst for the limelight, one might say. But yeah, so much more to cover here today. Let's see. I was also going to say, in terms of disclosure, I really would recommend you go to tannerfboyle.substack.com. Actually, does he have gettingspooked.com? I'm not sure, but no, I don't think that is. Oh, yes. Yes, you can go to gettingspooked.com, which will redirect you to tannerfboyle.substack.com, where his new article, The Disclosure Conundrum, Who to Trust When You Should Trust No One, on recent UFO releases, the uneventful days after revelation, and finding the real flying saucer within us all, the one that truly matters. Thank you, Tanner, for hitting it out of the park yet again. This is a talk that he presented this weekend at the PGH UFO Club conference at a place called Fungus Books and Records. Tanner is one of the great new voices who's been writing for the last several years on the parapolitical aspects of the UFO topic. If you don't know what I mean by that, suffice to say, it's always important when wading into the UFO muck to realize that manipulation is the game, whether it's the phenomenon manipulating us and humanity at large, or human agencies of all sorts utilizing their sometimes privileged access to information about this phenomena to manipulate us, the masses, society at large. Or at least that's what some of us believe. The views of this fellow here do not necessarily reflect those of this nonprofit. But I think the evidence is pretty clear. And at the very least, some people, like myself and others, believe this to be true. And these are things of import. The importance of myth, folklore, and belief systems is how it affects people's behaviors in the real world. And so people's beliefs in spiritual beliefs, in scientific beliefs, in whatever, belief informs behavior. Anyway, I would love to read some parts of this Getting Spooked article, but we really don't have the time. But I highly recommend and encourage you to go check it out yourself over at gettingspooked.com, tannerfboyle.substack.com. There's a lot of other stuff going on. Mike Clelland, the experiencer, the owl guy, as you might know him, has a post-disclosure day in my novel, The Unseen. Haven't read it, not sure what he's saying or the connections there, but definitely probably interesting stuff to check out. Meanwhile, over at forum.disclosure.org, there is this event of some sort coming up being put on by the Disclosure Foundation, who have been promoting and producing a lot of events and content related to this time. Coming up June 25th at the Kennedy Caucus Room, Disclosure Forum 2026, Humanity at the Edge of Discovery, Russell Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C. That's coming up in 7 days, 16 hours, 29 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. You can sign up. Here is some of the list of people, I guess, that might be attending. It's really unsure. It doesn't seem like they've got this all wrapped up yet, but it looks to be a big extravaganza of interest. Hopefully it'll be live streamed. And of course, coming up very soon is the SCU conference, that is the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, putting on their conference in Canada, titled The World is Watching. This is going to be July 24th through 26th. And again, you can actually sign up to watch this. It is a fee-based program, but they do good work. Micah Hanks is going to be MC again, and this looks to be pretty interesting. Meanwhile, coming up on June 27th is this Power to the Paper, Jailbreaking Disclosure Through Art, UFO art show and lecture featuring Creepy Kingdom and our own friend Greg Bishop. This is an art lecture soiree, roundtables, lectures, art exhibitions, and a VIP seance after hours. So that's going to be pretty freaking cool. All right. Now, moving right along. It's important in talking about Disclosure Day. Of course, most of you are familiar with Steven Spielberg. He obviously is considered one of America's foremost classic popular directors. He's done so many foundationally influential movies, both in the thriller and horror genre with Jaws, and of course, his earliest foray into science fiction with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which of course, highly influential for so many of us, particularly people of my age. I'm 55, and I was already obsessed with UFOs as a child, and that movie just cemented it. And, you know, Spielberg did a really good job with Close Encounters of the Third Kind of capturing the public's imagination by giving it what it wanted, which was a story about aliens and extraterrestrials as the explanation for the UFO phenomena. And he incorporated a lot of material from the popular literature, the mythology, and did so in a fantastic way, whereby he portrayed people all around the planet experiencing some kind of obsessive compulsive sense of contact, that they'd been exposed to something after witnessing UFOs, that made them feel like they had a mission. And in a lot of ways, that premise informs this new film. And yet, for me, the film falls far short of covering new ground, of advancing the plot, advancing humanity's story by way of his doing what he did before, of giving the public what they want, giving them a reductionistic, materialistic, simplistic version of the UFO mythology. Now, granted, most of you, if you're watching this, you probably already have an interest in these kinds of things, and you've probably read more than the average number of books or seen more than the average number of videos or documentaries on the subject of UFOs or other related phenomena. And what is related? Well, that's a matter of debate, obviously, but we'll get to that. Now, I'm going to try to cover more of this, but I'm going to, okay, so again, spoiler alert, I'm just going to lay it all out there. So if you haven't seen the film and don't want any spoilers, you should stop watching now. I know you should never tell your viewers to stop watching, but I understand, and I think there's so much to be gained by going into a film blind. At the same time, I was not. I had already watched every single trailer that came out, and I bore witness to what many of you did, likely, which was the teasing out of information. But very quickly, it became apparent what was going to be in this documentary. It's not a documentary. This science fictional retelling of the modern UFO myth, as Spielberg has even said, informed by his and his cast watching and digesting of this current moment in America's history. The multiple hearings over the past 3 or 4 years having to do with UFOs, the multiple claims of a variety of whistleblowers saying that they worked on a UFO Pentagon program for multiple years back over a decade ago. So much of this kicked off, of course, by the New York Times and others reporting in late 2017 about that program. And all of our attempts to try to tease out the truth or the reality, the facts about that post-2017 revelation. Okay, well, let me just start by saying, the film starts with a WWF kick in the face, kind of like we just experienced for the president's birthday on the White House lawn. We are literally treated with no respect. The boot of a professional theatrical wrestler smashing into our face over and over again. What could Spielberg mean by this? No, really. The movie starts with a World Wrestling Federation intro, whereby we're in a wrestling ring and we are one of the wrestlers being kicked in the face by the other wrestler. As it turns out, this is where our main character, or one of our main characters, Daniel Kellner, played by Josh O'Connor, is there to hand off the UFO archive that he has stolen from his bosses. But he's double-crossed. He's caught in a trap where his girlfriend is being leveraged as well for her life. She's been captured, and this is Jane Blankenship, played by Memphis Eve Sunnyday Iris Hewson, aka Eve Hewson. Her character's name Jane Blankenship. She's zip-tied, and Daniel is at the mercy of the evil Wardex Corporation and the character played by Colin Firth, known as Noah Scanlon, who I'll just refer to as Scanlon. Somehow, Daniel thwarts these goons and gets his girlfriend, gets the materials back that have just been taken from him, all by brandishing an alien artifact that everyone is terrified of. And they get in the car and run. The chase begins. Daniel drives Jane to a convent as he communicates with Hugo Wakefield, played by Coleman Domingo. Now, I was so disappointed with this film, but I still had a good time. I'm not going to completely poo-poo it. I enjoyed it, but I will warn you, I have a high tolerance for for bad movies. I can set aside my critical thinking and just really try to enjoy things as best I can. And I was there with friends, and it was, a birthday gathering. So yay. But yeah, the best surprise for me was after watching these trailers that only featured a maximum of 2 snippets of dialogue from Coleman Domingo. The best thing about this for me was the fact that he actually had a much larger role in this film. So we come to find out that Hugo Wakefield and several other War Decks minions have defected, have run off on their own, and are part of Hugo's network of vigilantes or rebels. So there's character development between Daniel and Jane as they converse on the way to and at the convent, and we start to see this relationship unfolding between Hugo and Daniel as Daniel's trying to get rid of the stuff that he stole so that he can go and be safe. Well, enter our next big main character, Margaret Fairchild, Kansas City meteorologist doing local TV weather person type stuff. She's introduced along with her boyfriend Jackson, played by Wyatt Russell. That's right, Kurt Russell's son, who is in so much stuff. Love the guy. Lodge 49, man, love him. And of course, I'm not sure if he was the son, but I think it was either Wyatt or one of others of Kurt Russell's son who was in the plane, I believe, with Kurt Russell the night of the infamous 1997 Phoenix Lights incident that, according to Kurt Russell, he was one of the people who called in from an airplane witnessing the lights. Years later, he remembered. While Jackson and his girlfriend, Margaret Fairchild, played by Emily Blunt, are getting ready for their day, she is triggered by a red CGI cardinal that flies in through a window, and she seems spellbound. Shortly thereafter, in the same scene, she suddenly begins speaking in Russian and doesn't realize it. Whereas Jackson, her boyfriend's just like hitting the floor, like, what the heck is going on? She gets pulled over by police for speeding on her way to work, which she's late for. And she inexplicably reads the mind or aura of the cop and tells him stuff she cannot know, to which he is completely shocked and lets her go. She then when she arrives at work late, she begins conversing with a Korean political analyst who's there to talk about the global geopolitical situation that's unfolding in the background. All we know is that, the world is on the edge of World War III, kind of like it feels like for the last year or two. And she inexplicably can speak a different language and doesn't even realize that she's doing it. She speaks in Korean to this analyst and provides translation with her coworkers and this Korean political analyst. She then is rushed onto stage to begin her weather broadcast and delivers her now famous alien clicking speech on live TV before collapsing. And then later we see her in a hospital. And in the hospital, Margaret's Spidey psi senses are tingling, and she escapes the hospital and goes on the run with her disbelieving boyfriend. Now, I may get some of these things slightly out of order, and I may be missing a couple of things. And I'm just kind of going along. I'll have more to say in a minute. With the help of Hugo's network, Daniel and Jane go to a rural safe house where we see more bad CGI animals. And this is something I remember from watching the trailer. Every time they showed any of these animals, it was so clearly bad CGI. And even the little girl that was shown alongside them in these trailers just looked like either a AI augmented or CGI little girl. I don't know. Well, while Daniel and Jane are there in this rural safe house that's very dilapidated, Daniel shows Jane the evidence, which the first thing he shows her is one of these videos of like surveillance footage from during the Nixon administration. And they've recreated a famous urban legend, ufological myth, which is that Jackie Gleason was obsessed with UFOs, flying saucers, and supposedly got shown the bodies by Nixon or some other official. And so that's the first footage that Daniel shows Jane, and which he says is why War Decks was, I think, created, so that as if it wouldn't have been created before then. And of course, there is this whole mythology that's not talked about in this film at all. And that is the MJ-12, Majestic 12 documents and lore that ever since 1947 or right thereafter, after the crash in Roswell, the whatever the heck happened in Roswell, that the United States military-industrial complex created the most ultimate secretive program to deal with the alien UFO extraterrestrial issue and the reverse engineering technology and what we now call the legacy programs. But Daniel also shows Jane the evidence of the torture of NHI, non-human intelligence, alien beings. And we see a very disturbing scene. Disturbing, but at the same time, the alien is CGI and it looks terrible to my eyes. But I still was moved by the scene, but that's really because of the context. And he warns her this is going to be hard to watch, and eventually he slams the laptop shut because he can't deal with it and figures she can't either. And Jane asks, "Are they children?" And he says no. And she asks, "Are they people?" And he says no. And this really bothers me. I mean, I get it, and I find it moving, but the overarching theme of this film is deep empathy. And as I think I've said in a previous broadcast, and why I was so offended by the president's trolling of the UFO community and humanity with its rollout of aliens.gov, whereby they did a cheesy throwback UFO website, X-Filean website, where they basically conflate illegal aliens, quote unquote, people who come across the border improperly, with quote unquote aliens in a ufological sense. These are people we're talking about. And anytime you other people, and anytime you other a quote unquote truly alien species, you're dehumanizing them, you're othering them and making them easy to hate and easy to make others hate. And I have a very real problem with it. Nonetheless, moving right along. So Daniel and Jane proceed to have a philosophical debate about whether or not he should even be doing this, whether disclosure is a good thing or not, how it could destabilize the planet when we're, in such an already destabilized point in history, on the verge of world war again. But also from a religious, spiritual perspective, Jane, who of course we've just learned earlier, had spent time in a convent and had thought about becoming a nun, but didn't. Not because she lost her faith, but just she became unsure. So they play up that debate, but it's not a very deep discussion of it. Meanwhile, Daniel goes off to use the phone to talk to Hugo again via one of these disposable burner satellite phones or flip phones. And this is where I'm a little bit confused, but while he's on the phone with either Hugo or someone else, I'll get to that, Daniel experiences the creation of a crop circle, whose symbol is the same as that on an alien artifact that Scanlan is at that moment using to dive in to Jane, to take control of her and use her later to try and kill Daniel. Now, this is a huge part of the film in some ways. This alien artifact comes up, it was used earlier by Daniel in a threatening way, and there's references to others have touched it and presumably died or been disintegrated or something. It's never quite said until we see things later. But so this crop circle happens. There's no explanation. It's just a crop circle forms, which is a beautiful scene. It's in all the trailers. I knew it was going to be there. This is, again, one of the related, quote unquote, other UFO related phenomena. Now, obviously, that's a whole other can of worms. That's a whole other thing. But that is part of the believer lore. The believer mythology is that crop circles are some kind of communication from aliens, by aliens, to us or the government. But it's never really expressed what's going on here. Now, what I'm confused about is, so at some point, Margaret, who's still at this point driving with her disbelieving boyfriend Jackson, suddenly knows that Daniel's in trouble and knows the phone number of that burner phone to call him, and calls him. So I'm not sure if she was on the phone at that time. So maybe it was her creating that crop circle. That might make a little bit more sense. Not really, but Anyway, she warns him about Scanlan and that they know where you are. But back to the big scene between Jane and Scanlan. Scanlan is using this. There's 3 of these alien artifacts. 2 have been stolen, but the Wardex, Scanlan still has 1 of them, and he's using it to basically telepresence to converse with Jane. So she's seeing him in the room with her, but he's also taking over control of her body. Her eye color is changing from her own eye color to his eye color. And he's basically trying to get her to commit to killing Daniel. And basically, he'll do it for her, through her, if he has to. So Daniel and Jane escape the rural safe house and go on a car chase and elude the Men in Black Wardex minions, eventually landing in a motel where he shows her the footage of Margaret speaking in alien tongues. And that's where he shows the footage of Margaret to Jane. Yes, Jane did try to kill Daniel. And so they tie her up later that night and try to take precautions, but they fail. But anyway, Daniel relates that he can understand the quote unquote, what Jane describes as gibberish, the alien clicking, the alien speaking in tongues of Margaret from the viral meteorologist speaking in tongues clip, that he can understand it, and that it's because of his having this amazing mathematical ability. And then later that night, once again, with Scanlan using the alien artifact, they are found by Wardex, and Daniel is captured, but not before he helps Jane escape with the other alien artifact. Margaret goes it alone. She gets rid of her boyfriend, Jackson, and she douses her way to the black site where Daniel has been taken by Wardex and where he's about to be interrogated by Scanlan. They injected him with truth serum or something. Now, when I say douses, she doesn't literally break out rods or a pendulum, but she's just driving by herself, and she just has all along been expressing that she has a sense psychically of where he is. Doesn't know how she knows, but she's following her instincts. She uses her abilities to get on to the base, the black site, basically reading people's minds, telling them what they need to hear from her, and just walks into the the makeshift mobile interrogation van. And then we see the next level of this power, where by looking into her eyes, she's able to read the person and either project deliberately or allow them to project somebody from their life, usually somebody very significant. And I believe in almost every instance, somebody who is dead. Now that is something, if you really want to dive deeper than this movie, gotta go watch Joshua Cutchin's recent interview on the Y-Files, The Basement interview podcast. I'm not finished with it yet because I'm taking my time with it. It is phenomenal. It is so good. And if you don't know who Joshua Cutchin is, you're in for a treat, because every book he's ever written is more or less groundbreaking. And one of his magnum opuses is called Ecology of Souls, which is a phrase from Terence McKenna, the psychedelic enthusiast of the 1990s, the Timothy Leary of the 90s, who talked about his experiences with psychedelic mushrooms and DMT, the spirit vine, used in ayahuasca and studied by the U.S. government, and which seems to have a predilection for creating extraterrestrial-like or alien other experiences in people using it. Not everybody, but Ecology of Souls by Joshua Cutchin goes deep into the weird connection between all these anomalous phenomena, cryptozoology, fairy lore, and UFO lore, and much more, and their connection with death. Highly recommend. You can also go to the Anomaly Archives YouTube channel, where you're probably watching this, and you can see Joshua's Anomaly Academy lecture on this very topic for free. Go check it out. All right. So Margaret convinces Scanlan. Margaret appears to Scanlan as his deceased wife. She takes Daniel after they've touched, and suddenly they have this connection. They feel like they know each other deeply, and she leaves with him. And every person that steps up, and there's a whole bunch of black-booted minion Wardex thugs, all armed, I think, or at least a few of them are armed. Nobody stops them. everybody that confronts her, the moment they get an eye shot with her, they're seeing and hearing from her some loved one, some deceased loved one, seemingly. And so they get off the base. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's nice. And again, it goes to this deep empathy idea, this main theme of the film. But hold on a second. But yeah, it's a bit much. Okay, sorry. Where was I? Yeah, so Margaret single-handedly rescues Daniel from the heavily staffed black site using her newfound psychic abilities that appear to project the expectations of those she directly engages with to see and hear a presumably deceased loved one. Throughout the movie, we see Hugo's Wardeck's defector network team inside a soundstage or a warehouse where they appear to be building a home. Among Hugo's Wardeck's defectors is a character named Nathan Twining. This is one of many Easter eggs in terms like the Jackie Gleason made footage. These are references, again, to real cases, real lore, real documents. And in fact, Nathan Twining is very famous. He was a graduate United States Military Academy at West Point, U.S. Air Force General, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 57 to 60. And he was a highly influential U.S. Air Force officer who served as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, making him one of the most powerful military figures of his time. Before attaining this role, he was the chief of staff of the U.S. Air Force and played a significant role in shaping post-World War II aviation strategy and military preparedness. And yes, but Twining is also known for his 1947 memo regarding unidentified flying objects, which was addressed to high-ranking military officials. In this memo, he acknowledged that UFO sightings were real and not merely hallucinations or misidentifications. He stated that the objects displayed advanced aerodynamics and were likely under intelligent control, suggesting that they warranted serious study. His stance was significant because it came at a time when the U.S. government was officially dismissing UFO reports. Twining's memo remains one of the most influential, most frequently cited documents in UFO research, as it provides early official recognition of the phenomenon by a high-ranking military official. Right. So that was just a nice Easter egg, whatever. They spell it with slightly differently. Twining having two N's instead of one, I believe. So the chase continues with Margaret driving Daniel as they get to know each other, both revealing how she's recently, because of seeing this bird, suddenly has these newfound abilities. And he, 15 years previously, while in college, had suddenly, after a weird experience, I think with an animal, suddenly had his mathematical abilities blossom to the point where he got him into a lot of trouble. He went to prison, and when he got out of prison, he was hired by Wardecks immediately. So they continue to get to know each other. The chase leads into the big main train-based action sequence and ultimately to a dramatic scene on board the train where Margaret is having a panic attack and Daniel helps her calm down. Now, just on the train scene, some of my friends found it very powerful, exciting, thrilling action sequence. Others were just like, yeah, since we all know about all the CGI and as well done as it was in some ways, it just didn't hit very powerfully with them, but they all felt like the acting, particularly in the panic attack scene that followed by Emily Blunt, was excellent. Now, who ran her into the train? Well, it's the one minion who hasn't, as far as we saw, been exposed to her ability. He was right there witnessing other people have this, and he's objecting the whole time, like, why are we letting her get away? And he doesn't, stop her either. But then in this chase sequence, he tries to ram their car into the train and then starts shooting at them as they're trying to get off the car that's being dragged along the tracks onto the train. I can't remember this character's name. I should have looked it up. But yeah, he's clearly like, she can't get away. We've got to kill them, which to me is much more in keeping with the lore that the legacy programs will threaten to kill you and will kill you. Now, whether that's true or not, we've gotten conflicting information from AARO, the All-Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, AARO, and their quote-unquote historical report riddled with errors as it was and incomplete as it was, and how we've never seen part 2 that was supposed to come out. But moving right along, after they encounter Daniel and Margaret encounter a CGI fox on the road. Margaret and Daniel make their way to the secret location of Hugo's faction. Margaret laments not being willing to be God to anyone, as literally one of Hugo's defector minions, kneels down and bows her head in front of Margaret. And she's like, no, I can't deal with this. I don't want to be, anyone's god. Or I don't know if she actually says that, but she says something to that effect. And then she goes into the, I'll say, Meow Wolf-esque house. If you've been to certain Meow Wolf art installations, you know that there is in this experience, this immersive experience, a full house inside of the structure wherever you're going to see Meow Wolf. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But it's also, I know this is a theme that's appeared in other science fiction too, but it's also it's a big hole, as far as I understand, in the plot, because Hugo at several points implies that they don't know who Margaret is or why she's suddenly, speaking in tongues on television. Like that's how she becomes known to both Wardex and Wardex's rebels with Hugo. And yet it turns out they've recreated Margaret's family home. So yeah, there's some really big problems here. She goes in, explores the home, goes to her old bedroom. It's exactly a reproduction of what her childhood home was. She's picking up objects, looking around. There's a mobile with red cardinals on it. The wallpaper is all butterflies. And there had been some reference to, I think, her interest in butterflies or butterfly wallpaper earlier, I think. This, I would suggest, may also be a not so subtle reference to the infamous but still unsubstantiated MK Ultra subprogram Monarch, as in Monarch Butterfly. That is a big rabbit hole, and I'm not going to go down it. And it's not necessarily directly related to UFOs or UFO lore. However, it is absolutely a part of the mind control lore, and as factual as and as much information as there is available about the CIA's MK Ultra and its many, many subprograms and its horrific abuses of humans, witting and unwitting subjects. The Monarch mythology is even more disturbing because it usually involves children, mind control experiments on children. It has always been suspected that the many documents that were not surrendered post-church committee hearings from the MK Ultra scientists that were destroyed by Richard Helms and others might have been those Monarch documents, but that's speculation. But suffice to say, some of the worst Manchurian Candidate style mind control research involving children is often associated with the idea of MK Ultra subprogram Monarch, and thus the butterfly reference. So Margaret and Daniel relive her abduction together with the help of the artifact there in her bedroom, or just sitting on the edge of the bedroom. It's kind of weird. Hugo and his team have all kinds of brain stuff, mapping equipment, set up to record this experience. So yes, it turns out Margaret and Daniel co-experienced at least one abduction together. And so that's where we get the flashbacks to her as a child, looking very much like an AI, CGI, computer-generated little girl with all the CGI animated, computer-looking, cheesy-looking animals coming into her bedroom, as you've seen in the previews, presumably, and then leading her through the snow to the Hansel and Gretel house. I forget where in the movie, but at some point she refers to it as a Hansel and Gretel house. Now, we know how that classic fable fairy tale ends, and it's not good. And sure enough, in the previews, we've seen this house in the snowy woods with her and the silhouettes of her and the animals walking towards it. There's some great shots of how the footsteps turn from hooves into four-toed alien footprints as they go into the house. The house, of course, is glowing. All the windows are bright. I mean, basically the house is a UFO. And inside, we see another representation of her bedroom or a normal house room fading into some kind of interior of a flying saucer UFO abduction environment where she is on a slab and starting to experience scary abduction type vibes. We see more of these rings of these artifacts descend on the children. they have their moment. They calm each other by reaching out and touching, their hands grasping, and we see their eyes changing colors and becoming sparkly as these artifact rings are descending and activating the children or doing something to the children. Now, I'm gonna just kind of, we're jumping ahead here, but there's this continuing focus said by Hugo as it's the two of you. It's always been just the two of you. And we find out basically through all of this, that aliens made Daniel understand mathematics and made Margaret, once activated, have these powerful psychic empathy abilities. It all doesn't really make sense in terms of this grand plan. But, you know, there's so many questions in all of this. But yeah, this all just reeks of everything that the UFO phenomena reeks of: trauma, mind control. You know, we didn't really focus on this with when Scanlan's using the artifact to dive into Jane, but that's a recurring theme amongst abductees and perhaps even contactees and perhaps even just normal UFO witnesses, but particularly abductees. Most of the abductees I've met, or a number of abductees I've met, have at some point stated that they felt they were not in control of themselves and were being manipulated externally, sometimes coming to some place where they have no idea how they got there, and a form of missing time, but a form whereby it's as if they were being puppeted like a marionette. And that is in fact what Scanlan did with Jane when he tried to have her kill Daniel in an earlier scene. Of course, none of this is really delved into deeply in this. Oh my gosh, we're 50 minutes in. Okay. So of course, there's a big escape sequence involving making a whole bunch of people in a place and vehicles invisible, or at least not perceived by the pursuers. I've seen some shots of this in the trailer. There's hilarity ensues, and they escape. And of course, where are they going to go? They're going to go to her old TV studio so that they can get the word out. So they get there, they start the process. Everybody's amazed to see Margaret again. And everybody inexplicably is like, why am I doing this, in terms of following her directions and the directions of the people she's with? And they're basically getting their ducks in a row. They're going to do this. They're going to get disclosure out there. They're going to get all the files out there. And of course, the Wardex goons successfully capture the TV station. They knock out the power. They knock out the backup generator, but they are confronted by an artifact wielding Margaret, who then repowers the station, and these armed jackboot Wardex goons. Well, that the right-hand man to Scanlan, who is the one who is so violent and aggressive and pushed them onto the train and tried to shoot at them, who's been like, why did you let him get away, kind of thing. He's just like, what, you're just going to let her get away with this? And Scanlan kind of just like goes and sits down, and this other lead goon just walks out, and all the goons follow him. It's so ridiculous. And again, the mythology is that this information has been kept secret under threat of death by the powers that be. They would have opened fire on everyone there, or at least the one henchman who drove them into the train should have yelled a command like, get her, or shoot her, or something. Like, I mean, I'll speculate that Spielberg just doesn't want to make that kind of a movie. And I get that. And of course, it is true that like there's a big, massive windows, and you know, these are shots you've seen in the trailer where a crowd has formed outside and are literally looking at this all unfolding inside the station, and have their cameras with their lights on their iPhones and everything. So, okay, yeah, the likelihood that they would have mass murdered everybody there, not likely, but it just seems like a cop out to me. So it happens. Disclosure happens. They've uploaded all the data from the archive into their server. They're pushing it out to all the stations. They're calling other stations, not just their own affiliate stations, but their competitor stations. They're just getting everybody to retransmit the feed. And so we get this long sequence that's the climactic reveal of the footage going out to the world. And it's just so much terrible CGI. I just found all of the footage. It's very reminiscent of things that we've seen post 2017. You know, a lot of clips of this have been in the last full-on trailer, so very little of this was a surprise. Every time they show the aliens, though, I'm just cringing. It looks so bad to me. And, I was still getting a little choked up, but I was also just like, it just doesn't work for me. I mean, yes, this is what I'm there for, but I wish they would have done it like halfway through the film, and had the rest of the film be like the fallout from this. But no, we're approaching the ending, and this is how they're ending it, with just newsrooms, news anchors responding emotionally as appropriate. And, I guess that's all good. But so after all this data gets pumped out there, we get the final finale reveal, whereby they literally roll out a figure shrouded in plastic in a wheelchair of some sort and take away all the material. And we see a very old gray alien, to which I wanted to yell, "Grandpa!" but I didn't. And then the chair assists this much taller than all the other aliens we've seen. And that is, again, in keeping with the lore. You hear about these little gray, not green aliens. So it is important to state that all the UFO mythology that we're focusing on and that Steven Spielberg is focusing on excludes the massive amount of non-Western UFO close encounter cases and humanoid cases. That are so many weird varieties of beings, most of them humanoid, but this is a whole area of debate amongst true UFO researchers, is the nature of the differences between all the different types of reported aliens. And instead, we just focus in this story on this one species. There's never references to other species. But again, in the lore, in the abduction accounts, typically Western American, particularly abduction accounts, but it's worldwide. There are these short, big-headed, big-eyed aliens, but often they are attended by and led by their tallest, to use the Invader Zim term, the taller aliens. Now, obviously, there's some things to say about this, but basically, so this very tall alien gets out of the chair and starts leaning towards the side of the head of one of these Daniel or Margaret, I forget which. I guess it's Margaret. And I swear, this is another moment I was just like, I wanted to yell, "Nom, nom, 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 nom," and just see this alien lurch forward and bite off her head or start eating on something and just completely change the narrative at the last second. That would have been hilarious. Never was going to happen. I know, I'm just being silly, but I just could imagine this big, tall alien, this alien gray, which also very much reminds me of the giant mantids. Oh, do you know about those? That's right. Yes. One of the other types that's been seen, and again, a lot of these types of aliens in the UFO lore are seen with each other. They're also seen with humans and the military humans, and they're seen with your dead relatives. It's much weirder. But yes, the giant mantids, yes, giant praying mantis insectoids are sometimes reported. Anyway, that didn't happen. And after whatever we don't hear, something is whispered or closely, I mean, they're telepathic, so like gets up close to whisper a telepathic message into the head of, I guess, Margaret. Margaret then goes in front of the camera again and looking at the audience, all of the audience, including us in the theater, and says, "Listen, the end. That's it." Okay, so real quickly, there's this theme of radical empathy exemplified by Margaret's abilities, but I mean, come on, like, I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. And this plays into the classic trope of disclosure project snake oil salesman, Stephen Greer. There's a man named Stephen Greer who's been at this for a long time and makes all kinds of crazy, bold claims about informing presidents and chiefs of staff about the nature of the UFO reality. And he has maintained for a long time that all aliens are good. They're so advanced, they have to be morally good. And that all the negative things you ever hear about aliens and UFOs and alien abductions, that's all propaganda by the military-industrial complex to demonize aliens so that people will fear engaging with them. Now, maybe that's true. I always flash back to Jimi Hendrix in an interview talking about, hey man, if you're walking through a field, you're not going to just go out of your way to go stomp on an anthill as a way of saying, why would extraterrestrials be, violent? But we don't know. I mean, come on. The other thing is this focus on the two. It's always been the two. This is something that Hugo says to Daniel and Margaret multiple times. And we never hear about any other experiencers, though they do refer to them. Oh, is he an experiencer? So it's implied through omission that there are other experiencers out there, but there's nothing about the mass scale that one would assume is the case if you've ever paid any attention to this, the sheer numbers of cases out there. Now, granted, okay, maybe it's 80 to 90% UFO haystack territory. The classic 80 to 90+% of UFO sightings are in fact IFOs. If you had enough information, you could identify the object and it wouldn't be an unidentified flying object. You'd be able to identify it as a misidentification of something normal. Similarly, okay, maybe 80 to 90+% of people claiming these deeply personal, intense, close encounters, contact, abduction experiences. Okay, maybe a huge percentage of those aren't actually the real thing or some other psychological phenomena. But at the heart of this deep empathy being shown by Margaret is this idea that this phenomena, these aliens, are able to manipulate our perceptions. The terribly CGI aliens and animals, I really must assume that Spielberg can afford better computer graphic effects and that this was a deliberate way of nodding to the audience to go, no, these aren't real. They're screen memories. They are projections into the minds of the witnesses, the experiencers, the abductees, to calm them. And this is kind of revealed, but are they shapeshifters in the classic physical transmutation way, or is it just all psychological? I would lean towards all psychological in many different ways of thinking about the true UFO phenomenon and the way that it's portrayed in this film. But it also really bothers me, and I know there's so much controversy and arguing over the idea of woke this and woke that, and diversity. We are in a very bad time to talk about these things, but it does bother me personally that they focus on these two white people as experiencers, don't acknowledge the breadth of experience. And at the same time, it's important to note that there is a distinct lack, not a complete lack, but several researchers, Professor Wham, shout out, Professor Wham, WHAM, ProfessorWham.com. You can look at her videos of lectures that she's given for the Anomaly Archives on our YouTube channel. Back in 2000, 2001, 2002, her dissertation, which we have a copy of, is phenomenal, and it deals with this idea of where are all the black abductees. It's not to say that there aren't some. And again, the quintessential first American alien abduction case is an interracial couple with Betty and Barney Hill, where Betty's a white woman and Barney's a black man. But these are issues that are very salient and interesting to explore. And it really bothers me that the only significant person of color who's in the main cast is Coleman Domingo, which thank you. I'm so glad he was there because I love him. I think he's great. And there are clearly it's a diverse subcast, but they don't have any significant roles. You're trying to talk about global disclosure. You're showing endless shots of people around the world waiting at bus stops, on the subway, in the streets, and you're not exploring that. And then there's the religious aspect of this. Okay, you show presumably a Catholic convent. Maybe I guess there are Christian convents. I don't know, but here is Steven Spielberg, a man who maybe, his particular religious and spiritual beliefs may be more complex than just I'm a believer or I'm a practitioner of Judaism. But there's a distinct lack of any other cultural religious perspectives in this. Now, I understand, okay, this is for an American Western audience, but it's, if they're going to make money, they've got to appeal to a much wider audience. And there's so many ways that they could do that. And there's so many ways that could make the story much more interesting. Think back to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think I already mentioned this, but multiple people are experiencing this, and they get winnowed down to our two main characters through them overcoming the hurdles, keeping all these other experiencers who are trying to get to the landing spot. They could have done something similar. I mean, I'm sure he didn't want to do the same thing again. Okay, I get that. Again, the bad CGI. I already mentioned all that. Also, you know what? Sorry, Steven. You should never, ever have shown the aliens. Period. This would have been so much more powerful, so much better of a movie if you hadn't shown the aliens in any of the footage. That's good horror movie making, and it's good movie making. But again, the classic from Spielberg, there's a quote that's attributed to him that he allegedly said to Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée was the inspiration for the French scientist Lacombe in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's been said for years and reported many, many times in places that Jacques Vallée and his mentor, J. Allen Hynek, who worked for Project Blue Book, were consultants for Spielberg on Close Encounters. And Vallée really wanted there to be more to it. And Spielberg's response to Vallée trying to get him to consider other things other than the extraterrestrial hypothesis was to say, you're probably right, but that's not what the public is expecting. This is Hollywood, and I want to give people something that's close to what they expect. And so Spielberg has said in public recent interviews how much he was in his views on the idea of, yes, there's extraterrestrials out there somewhere, but have they come here? Don't know. Would like it to be true. But now, because of the hearings and all this other stuff that's been happening post 2017, he has become much more of a believer that, yes, there is something going on. There is a cover up. Of course, he also produced in 2023 with J.J. Abrams, the Encounters docuseries on, I think, Netflix. Yeah. What else did I? So let me go ahead and I'm going to play a few things, and that's probably going to be it. There's obviously I could discuss this a lot more, and I know I probably spent too much time just going scene by scene, but I was hoping things might jog my memory. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Maybe that was a bit too much. I'm sorry. But I do want to play a couple of things for you. So over at, I didn't open this up. Where is this? Over on X Twitter, there's a user who often collects great information, puts it out there for folks to check out. That's Red Panda Koala. And I don't know when was this? Gosh, not sure. Oh, this was, on June 5th, he posted this. And it's a clip, and he's got the quote there, but I'm going to go ahead and just play the clip. Now, this is from an old Jeffrey Mishlove Thinking Aloud interview that Mishlove did with Vallée back in the day. It's about 2 minutes long.
One of the interesting things to mention about you is the fact that you were the person that Steven Spielberg modeled a character of a UFO researcher on in his classic movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I think he was intrigued with the idea of a French scientist running around the United States investigating the UFO phenomenon.
You've been looking at this phenomenon for a long time. You've worked closely with Dr. Allen Hynek and other UFO researchers. You've written many authoritative books, and yet your perspective on the UFO issue seems rather unique in the sense that you don't seem to be jumping on the extraterrestrial visitors bandwagon.
That's what was the main point of disagreement with Steven Spielberg. When I met Steven Spielberg, he was about halfway through filming Close Encounters, and we had a long discussion about what UFOs could be. And of course, for him, the main point of the movie was entertainment, and it was appropriate for the UFOs to be extraterrestrial visitors. I think that from my own point of view, I'm going to be very disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet, because I think they could be something much more interesting.
Something from another dimension of space or time?
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Mm-hmm. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
So that was, I believe, in the 1990s. That was, of course, you can go watch Jeffrey Mishalov's new Thinking Aloud YouTube channel. Great interviews. Love his work. Always has very interesting people on. Now, jump forward to just a year or two or so ago with James Fox, who was among the many at last week's Tuesday, June 9th, press conference held on the the Capitol steps by all these various politico and military folks that are calling for UFO disclosure. You can watch the last episode where I played clips of that and talked about it. And of course, it was all focused around David Grush, the whistleblower who's really resurrected so many of these claims and really eclipsed Lou Elizondo post 2017. But Jacques appeared on Joe Rogan's show with James Fox sometime back, and there's just a brief minute or so clip from that.
Spielberg was intrigued with the idea of a character that was not quite as weird as, the ETs, but was a lot weirder than, the people on the ground in the U.S. trying to make sense of this in the military and so on. So he needed this intermediate character. He thought, Frenchman was the right thing to do.
And so did you talk to him about the film? Did you talk to him about when he was putting it together? And
yeah, a journalist put us together when about halfway through the final shooting of the film, and there were gaps in the movie at that point, and we had lunch twice together, and it was a lot of fun. He was, at the time, he was looking for a transition between the time when they know the big thing is coming, the mothership is coming, and they don't know where. And the mothership is sending signals, but they can't decipher the signals.
So one last thing, and this isn't directly related to this movie, but I thank you, Gail, for sending me this clip. For those who aren't familiar, there's a Houston-based UFO enthusiast who used to publish Houston Sky newsletter back in the 90s, and Gail recently created the final new last issue, which you can download for free on the anomalyarchives.org website. But she sent me this clip, which I really thoroughly enjoyed, and I think you might too. And I think it's pretty good. So this will be pretty much the end. It's about a 5-minute clip, folks. So sit back, enjoy, and thank you for watching. I'll have a few more comments at the end, but this is pretty much it. Here we go.
We just saw Disclosure Day last night, and it's really got me thinking that I want to tell people what I saw in Bimini in 1982. I can't explain what it was. I'll just tell you what I saw, and you decide. I was with my Uncle Dan and my cousin Tammy. We were in Bimini, which is a tiny island in the Bahamas. It's only about half a mile wide and a mile long. It's very tiny. It was very underdeveloped at the time. And we had just finished hanging out at a bar, and the bar had shut down, and we went swimming in the ocean in the middle of the night because it was like bath water. It was beautiful. And as we were floating, looking up at the sky, it was a million stars, no clouds, totally clear night. All of a sudden, we started getting dressed, and we saw this incredibly bright light. I've never seen anything that bright in my life that wouldn't burn your eyeballs out. And so we just started running toward it. It was sort of on the other side of this tiny island. So we just started running toward it, and we ran out as far as we could, get as close to it as we could. And it was this massive light that was rising out of the ocean. And I mean, I would say it was like a football field wide. And the unusual thing about it was that at the edges of the light, it was like clear cut, like a laser. Like it wasn't like when you shine a flashlight and the beam goes out and it kind of fuzzes out at the edges. It was like clear cut, football field wide, rising up out of the ocean. It rises up and it goes off to the right like this. And we look up and there's this massive, thick black cloud, massive, one singular cloud. It goes up to that cloud. It goes inside of it, and then it just goes into the sky. I mean, we saw it like a shooting star going up. And we're looking at each other like, what did we just see that? You know, questioning ourselves. But then another one came up and did the exact same thing. And then another one came up and did the exact same thing. All three of them shot up into the sky. We could see them like large stars way up in the sky, and we could see the beams of light shining down under them. And they started making different shapes, switching around, and you could see the beams going this way, it's going that way. And then they finally came to where their beams were shining at each other, and they made a triangle way up in the sky. So it was like seeing three big bright stars in the sky and light connecting them like a triangle. That's what we saw. My uncle made us swear that we would never tell anyone. My uncle was a celebrity at the time. He was Dan Haggerty. He was Grizzly Adams, this very wholesome family icon. And he didn't want to end up in the pages of the National Enquirer. So my cousin and I, we were very young, and we were 19, and we swore to him, we'll never tell anyone. So we really didn't. I only told a few very close friends and family. And then my uncle died, and then my cousin died, and I'm the last person alive that knows what we saw. And I'm a cancer survivor. Like, I don't want to die with this story inside of me and nobody know what we saw. Many years later, my husband and I are musicians. We were really fortunate to play a gig at CERN in Geneva, and where all the astrophysicists are working on things like this. And I sat and had lunch with an astrophysicist, and I explained to him what I saw, and I said, is there anything on Earth that could explain, is there anything we're doing that could explain what I saw? And he said, nope. And that's all he said. So you can come up with your own conclusions. This is what I saw. And now it's out in the world. This is my disclosure day.
This is my disclosure day. I love that story. And thank her so much for speaking out about that. Yeah. It's these stories that are so important. And while that may not constitute physical evidence, the likes of which so many of us yearn for and hope for to prove the reality that some of us want to be true, it's the stories that are the most important. And storytelling is an important way of exploring and expressing these things. And so, again, I will recommend that you check out Joshua Cutchin's very personal interview on The Basement. That's from the producer of the Y-Files, where you'll do the deepest dive ever and learn a lot about a good friend and wonderful researcher Joshua Cutchin, and a lot about the phenomenon and what it means to so many of us who've been looking at it for so long and doing deep dives into its murky, mysterious depths. I should note, coming up next week? June 24th, anniversary of the birth of the modern UFO era. We're going to be having David Metcalf presenting Strange Accidents, Anomalies at the Edge of Perception. You can go to the Anomaly Archives website. The links to that event will be at the Anomaly Archives website and our Patreon, patreon.com/Anomaly Archives. And this is going to be a phenomenal lecture. David Metcalf is an amazing, thoughtful person exploring these subjects, and you're in for a treat. And so also, because of the anniversary, we're going to be making this publicly available to everybody. We may actually be streaming it here on our YouTube channel, possibly on our other social media outlets, Facebook, Twitch. We'll see. But it's definitely going to be much more publicly available for you to watch live than our normal Anomaly Academy lecture series, which is reserved for those patrons of a certain tier or higher. But happy disclosure, everyone. Enjoy, be good to each other, and take care. Good night.